What if I told you that the single most powerful tool for transforming your digestion, your mood, and your entire immune system isn't some new pharmaceutical, but a forgotten category of food your ancestors ate every single day without even thinking about it? Most people don't know this, but the fibers in certain ancient foods don't just pass through you. They literally communicate with the trillions of bacteria living in your gut. And those bacteria then produce compounds that control inflammation, brain chemistry, and your ability to fight off sickness. Modern science has only recently caught up to what the scriptures described as the daily bread of life. Today, I'm going to walk you through 20 prebiotic foods, ranked from genuinely helpful to absolutely life-changing. Stick around because number 13 on this list was so prized by our ancestors that it was used as a coffee substitute during entire wars. And it contains a staggering amount of a specific fiber that modern guts are starving for. And number 20, the food sitting at the very top of this countdown, is something you've probably thrown away your entire life without realizing it, contains one of the most potent prebiotic loads in the entire plant kingdom. Before we get into this list, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a video where we uncover the genuine, ancient, God-given remedies that modern science is just now validating. Here are 20 prebiotic foods, ranked from helpful to absolutely life-changing. Number 20, cooked and cooled rice, the humble transformation of a simple grain. Now I know starting with rice sounds almost too basic, but this isn't about fresh, hot rice. This is about the quiet miracle that happens when you put it in the refrigerator. In the book of Exodus, we read about the daily provision of manna, a substance that had to be gathered and processed daily. The principle was clear. What God provides often requires a specific handling to unlock its full nourishment. We've lost that patience. We want our food instant, hot, and immediate. But when you cook rice and then cool it for 12 to 24 hours, something extraordinary happens on a molecular level. The starch granules undergo a process called retrogradation. They literally rearrange themselves into a crystalline structure that resists digestion in your small intestine. This is resistant starch. Modern clinical research has shown that cooked rice that is cooled and then gently reheated can contain 2 to 5 times more resistant starch than the freshly cooked version. That resistant starch travels all the way down to your large intestine intact, where your gut bacteria ferment it into short-chain fatty acids. Butyrate, acetate, propionate. These are the fuel sources that heal your colon cells and tighten the junctions in your gut wall, preventing leaky gut syndrome. Here's the traditional use. Next time you make a pot of rice, cook it, let it cool completely, and store it in the refrigerator overnight. The next day, you can eat it cold in a salad, or you can reheat it gently. The resistant starch largely survives moderate reheating. Think of it as a time-release capsule of healing that only patience can unlock. We abandoned this practice when we started eating instant rice and fast food. And our gut microbiomes have been paying the price ever since. Number 19, red wine, the sacred fruit of the vine in its fermented glory. In Psalm 104, the psalmist praises God for bringing forth wine that gladdens the heart of man. This wasn't a concession to vice. It was a recognition of a fermented food that, in moderation, carries profound biological benefits. We're not talking about the alcohol here, we're talking about the polyphenols. The deep purple pigment in red wine comes from compounds like resveratrol, quercetin, and a host of other flavonols that your body cannot digest. So where do they go? Straight down to your colon, where your beneficial bacteria feast on them. Modern clinical studies have demonstrated that the polyphenols in red wine act as potent prebiotics, selectively stimulating the growth of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus species, while simultaneously inhibiting the growth of pathogenic Clostridia. This is the biblical balance. The fermentation process of the grape doesn't just preserve the fruit. It transforms its chemistry into something that feeds the community of microorganisms living inside you. Here's the traditional use. A small glass, and I mean 4 to 6 ounces, of dry red wine consumed occasionally with a meal can provide that polyphenolic boost. But remember, the ethanol is a toxin that your liver must process. The prebiotic benefit is in the grape's darkened skin, not the alcohol percentage. Think of it as a liquid supplement that requires a steward's wisdom. Overdo it, and the poison overtakes the medicine. Respect it, and you're tapping into a fermentation tradition that dates back to Noah planting the very first vineyard. Number 18. Chia seeds, the dust of the earth that becomes a gel of life. When these tiny seeds hit water, they swell into a mucilaginous gel, a slippery, hydrating matrix that slows down your digestion and creates a protective barrier along your intestinal wall. In ancient Aztec and Mayan cultures, these seeds were a staple, carried by warriors and messengers for sustained energy. The Bible doesn't specifically name chia, but the principle of the small seed with the mighty impact is everywhere in Scripture. From the mustard seed to the daily grain offering. The soluble fiber in chia seeds is a direct prebiotic substrate. When it reaches the colon, that gel becomes a fermentation feast for your good bacteria. The bacteria break it down into butyrate, which, as I've said before, is the primary energy source for your colonocytes, the cells that line your large intestine. Without butyrate, those cells literally starve and begin to malfunction, leading to inflammation and intestinal permeability. Modern science has documented that the regular consumption of chia seeds increases stool frequency, softens stool consistency, and promotes a more diverse microbial ecosystem. Here's the traditional use. Soak a tablespoon of chia seeds in water or milk for at least 20 minutes until it forms a pudding. You can flavor it with honey or cinnamon. This was the original energy gel, but unlike modern processed versions, it repairs your gut while it fuels your body. The real question is, why are we eating processed fiber bars when a spoonful of these seeds soaked in liquid offers a genuine, slow-release microbiome feeding solution? Number 17. Flax seeds, the golden brown armor of intestinal healing. In the book of Proverbs, there is a description of a virtuous woman who seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. Flax, or linseed, has been cultivated since the dawn of civilization. Its fibers clothed the priests in the temple, but its seeds were medicine. When I say flax seeds, I'm talking about a dual-action prebiotic that almost no one uses correctly. Flax seeds contain two distinct classes of fiber. The first is a soluble mucilaginous fiber that forms a slippery gel, very similar to chia, which soothes the digestive tract and feeds beneficial bacteria. The second is an insoluble lignin-bound fiber that acts like a gentle broom, sweeping the colon clean and providing a scaffold for bacterial colonies to adhere to. But here's the critical piece of knowledge that modern science has confirmed and our ancestors knew intuitively. Whole flax seeds largely pass through you undigested. The tough outer hull is impenetrable to your digestive enzymes. You must grind them. Freshly ground flax seeds release their oils and make their fibers bioavailable. Clinical trials have shown that ground flax seed consumption significantly increases the production of enterolignins, compounds produced by gut bacteria that have protective effects against hormone-sensitive cancers. Here's the traditional use. Buy whole organic flax seeds, store them in a cool, dark place, and grind just what you need for a few days in a coffee grinder. Sprinkle the meal over your oats, your salads, or mix it into your bread dough. Think of flax as a two-part system. The gel heals and feeds, the lignins scrape and protect. We've replaced this ancient protector with laxatives and fiber powders, forgetting that the genuine article was sitting in our grandmother's pantry the whole time. Number 16. Seaweed, the salty green harvest from the depths of creation. On the third day of creation, God gathered the waters and called them seas, and he saw that it was good. Within those seas, he placed a category of life that is neither plant nor animal in the way we normally think, but a form of marine algae that is arguably one of the most nutrient-dense and probiotically potent substances on the planet. Seaweed, whether it's kelp, nari, wakame, or dulse, contains unique sulfated polysaccharides like fuchidin and laminarin. These are not found in land plants. Your human enzymes cannot break them down. They are exclusively food for your gut bacteria. Modern clinical research has identified that these marine polysaccharides selectively stimulate the growth of bacteroid species and certain lactobacillus strains that produce short-chain fatty acids at an accelerated rate. The coastal communities in Ireland, Japan, and the Pacific Islands, who traditionally consumed seaweed daily, had remarkably low rates of colon cancer and inflammatory bowel disease. Their gut bacteria were being fed a unique fiber that the rest of the modern world was starving for. Here's the traditional use. Dried seaweed can be crumbled over soups and stews as a salt replacement, or sheets of nari can be used to wrap vegetables and rice. The salty, umami flavor is a gift from the ocean that simultaneously seasons your food and fertilizes your internal garden. Think of it as a direct nutrient infusion from a part of creation that most of us have completely ignored. The land gives us our vegetables, but the sea gives us a prebiotic that exists nowhere else. Number 15. Lentils, the humble disk of sustenance that sustain the patriarchs. In Genesis chapter 25, we encounter the famous story of Esau selling his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of lentil stew. Now, most people read this and think Esau was just foolish and impulsive. But let's look deeper. He came in from the field exhausted, his body was depleted. And what was Jacob cooking? A red lentil stew. Esau wasn't just hungry. He was physiologically desperate for exactly what that stew contained. Lentils are a powerhouse of resistant starch and soluble prebiotic fiber. A single cup of cooked lentils provides over 15 grams of fiber, a significant portion of which resists digestion until it reaches the colon. The gut bacteria ferment those fibers into short-chain fatty acids that signal satiety to your brain, stabilize your blood sugar, and repair your intestinal lining. Esau's body knew exactly what it needed. Modern science has caught up to that ancient stew pot. Clinical studies show that regular lentil consumption improves glycemic control, reduces LDL cholesterol, and dramatically increases fecal butyrate concentrations. Here's the traditional use. Soak your lentils overnight in warm water with a splash of something acidic like lemon juice or apple cider vinegar. This begins the sprouting process, neutralizing phytic acid and making the minerals more bioavailable. Then cook them slowly with garlic, onion, and cumin. The result is a creamy, earthy stew that feeds your gut bacteria for hours after you eat it. The real question is, why aren't you eating them every week? We've replaced the slow carbohydrate with processed, instant grains, and our colons are literally starving for the resistant starch that lentils provide. Number 14. Asparagus, the slender green spear of springtime renewal. This plant is mentioned in historical records dating back to ancient Egypt and Rome, but its prebiotic power is firmly rooted in the fiber it carries. Asparagus contains roughly 2 to 3 grams of inulin per 100 grams serving. Inulin is a fructan, a chain of fructose molecules linked together in a way that human enzymes cannot sever. It travels completely intact to the colon, where Bifidobacterium and other beneficial species possess the enzyme inulinase to break it down. When they do, they multiply rapidly, crowding out pathogens and producing a surge of butyrate. Modern clinical trials have demonstrated that consuming asparagus daily for just a few weeks significantly shifts the gut microbial composition toward a more anti-inflammatory profile. There's also something poetic here. Asparagus is a perennial plant. It comes back year after year. It teaches patience. You don't harvest it in the first year, you wait. And in that waiting, the crown develops a deep root system that produces those tender spears. Your gut health also requires patience and consistent feeding. You can't eat one spear and expect a transformation. Here's the traditional use. Lightly steam or blanch asparagus, just until it turns bright green. Overcooking destroys the inulin structure. A drizzle of olive oil and a pinch of salt is all it needs. Some traditional practices even consume the fibrous ends that modern cooks snap off and discard. Recognizing that the toughest parts contain the highest concentration of prebiotic fiber. Think of asparagus as a seasonal reset button, a spring tonic that sweeps through your digestive tract after a long winter of heavier foods, feeding the bacteria that will protect you for the rest of the year. Number 13. Chicory root, the roasted, earthy savior of entire generations. During the Napoleonic era, when continental blockades cut off coffee supplies to France, the people turned to a wild plant growing along the roadsides. Chicory. They dug up the roots, roasted them until they turned dark brown and fragrant, ground them and brewed a dark, slightly nutty, slightly bitter beverage that mimicked coffee. What they didn't realize was that they were simultaneously creating one of the most potent prebiotic sources in the entire world. Chicory root contains up to 41 grams of inulin per 100 grams of dry weight. That is an extraordinary concentration. Nearly 68% of its total fiber comes from inulin. When you consume chicory, you are delivering a targeted payload directly to your bifidobacterium populations. Modern clinical research has shown that just a few grams of chicory-derived inulin per day can significantly increase stool frequency, soften stool consistency, and relieve chronic constipation. It works by pulling water into the bowel and simultaneously feeding the bacteria that produce lubricating short-chain fatty acids. Here's the traditional use. Roasted chicory root granules can be brewed just like coffee. It's dark, rich, and caffeine-free, making it an ideal evening beverage. You can also find the fresh root, scrub it clean, slice it thin, and roast it in your own oven. The entire house fills with a toasty, caramel-like aroma. Think of it as a daily infusion that doesn't just wake up your mind, but wakes up the sleeping microbial community in your gut. We abandoned chicory when coffee became cheap and plentiful, but we lost a genuine medicinal food in the process. The French were onto something they didn't even fully understand. Number 12, leeks. The tall, layered stalk of the allium family that too many people ignore. In the Book of Numbers, when the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, they grumbled and remembered the foods of Egypt. They specifically listed leeks among the things they missed. This wasn't a random craving. Leeks were a staple of the ancient Near Eastern diet for good reason. They are packed with inulin and fructooligosaccharides, or FOS, the same class of prebiotic fibers found in chicory, but delivered in a milder, more culinary form. The layered structure of the leek is almost a visual metaphor for how prebiotics work. They build layer upon layer of protection in your gut. The white and light green parts of the leek contain the highest concentration of these fibers, which feed your beneficial bacteria and help them produce antimicrobial compounds that keep pathogens at bay. Modern science has identified that the organosulfur compounds in leeks, similar to those in garlic and onions, also have direct anti-inflammatory effects on the gut lining. Here's the traditional use. Slice leeks thinly and wash them thoroughly to remove the grit that hides between the layers. Then sauté them gently in olive oil until they become silky and sweet. That sweetness is the inulin beginning to break down slightly under heat, but enough remains intact to reach your colon. Add them to soups, stews, or simply serve them as a side dish. The Israelites craved them in the desert because their bodies recognized what their minds may have forgotten. Leeks are comfort food with a clinical purpose. Think of them as a gentle, everyday prebiotic that doesn't announce itself loudly, but steadily rebuilds your gut ecology with every spoonful. Number 11, oats, the humble whole grain that carries the signature fiber beta-glucan. When the scriptures speak of the daily bread and the grain offerings of the temple, they are pointing toward a category of food that was considered foundational to human life. Oats are one of the most accessible and well-studied prebiotic grains on Earth. They contain a specific soluble fiber called beta-glucan, which forms a viscous gel in your digestive tract. This gel doesn't just lower cholesterol by trapping bile acids. It also travels to the colon, where it serves as a fermentable substrate for your beneficial bacteria. But there's more. Oats also contain resistant starch, particularly when they are cooked and allowed to cool slightly. And they contain various phytochemicals, avenanthramides and phenolic compounds that act as prebiotics as well. This is a triple action food. Modern clinical trials have repeatedly demonstrated that daily oat consumption increases the abundance of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus species, while simultaneously reducing markers of systemic inflammation. Here's the traditional use. Old-fashioned rolled oats or steel-cut oats are your best choice. Instant oats are so heavily processed that much of the resistant starch structure has been destroyed. Cook them on the stovetop with water or milk, a pinch of salt, and then let them sit for a few minutes off the heat. The cooling process allows some of the gelatinized starch to retrograde into resistant starch. Top them with sliced apples or a drizzle of raw honey, both prebiotic in their own right, and you have a breakfast that feeds your gut bacteria for hours. Think of oats as a warm, creamy delivery system for the fiber your microbiome has been craving. We've replaced them with sugary cereals and toaster pastries, and we've lost the steady, healing rhythm of a genuine whole grain. Number 10, apples, the crisp, sweet orb that has become the symbol of health itself. There's a reason the proverb, "An apple a day keeps the doctor away," has persisted for centuries. It's not just a quaint saying. It's a biochemical reality rooted in the pectin fiber, concentrated in the apple's skin and flesh. Pectin is a soluble fiber with powerful prebiotic properties. When it reaches your colon, your gut bacteria ferment it into butyrate, which, as I've mentioned repeatedly, is the primary fuel for your colon cells. But pectin does something else that is quite remarkable. It actually decreases the population of harmful bacteria, such as certain Clostridium species, while simultaneously feeding the beneficial ones. It's a selective prebiotic. It discriminates. Modern clinical studies have shown that apple pectin consumption increases fecal short-chain fatty acid concentrations and improves the integrity of the gut barrier. The apple skin is particularly rich in pectin and also contains quercetin, a flavonoid that your gut bacteria convert into anti-inflammatory metabolites. Here's the traditional use. Eat the whole apple, skin and all. The skin contains a significant portion of the pectin and almost all of the quercetin. Choosing organic apples is wise, as conventionally grown apples are heavily sprayed. If you can, find heirloom varieties at a farmer's market. They often have thicker, more tannic skins and a higher pectin content than the overly sweet, modern commercial varieties. The crunch you hear when you bite into a fresh apple is the sound of fiber that will travel all the way to your colon intact. Think of it as a self-contained prebiotic package, designed by nature to be portable, durable, and perfectly dosed. We've juiced the apple, stripped its fiber, and turned it into sugary cider, forgetting that the genuine medicine was in the pulp we threw away. Number 9, barley, the ancient grain of the harvest festivals. In the Book of Ruth, we see Ruth gleaning barley in the fields of Boaz. This was the grain of the poor, the grain of sustenance, the grain that marked the beginning of the harvest season. Barley contains the highest concentration of beta-glucan of any whole grain. A 100-gram serving of whole barley provides between 5 and 11 grams of beta-glucan, a staggering amount. That viscous, soluble fiber doesn't just lower cholesterol. It is a feast for your gut bacteria. When they ferment beta-glucan, they produce a surge of short-chain fatty acids that lower the pH of your colon, making it inhospitable to pathogens and ideal for beneficial species. Modern clinical trials have confirmed that barley consumption significantly improves insulin sensitivity, reduces inflammatory markers, and promotes the growth of bifidobacterium. But here's what we've lost. We've pearled the barley, stripping off the outer bran layer where much of the beta-glucan and resistant starch resides. Pearled barley is still beneficial, but hulled barley, the whole intact grain, is far superior. Here's the traditional use. Soak hulled barley overnight in warm water to begin the germination process and reduce cooking time. Then simmer it slowly in broth with vegetables and herbs. The resulting grain is chewy, nutty, and deeply satisfying. It can be used as a base for stews, added to soups, or even served as a breakfast porridge with honey and dried fruit. Ruth gleaned this grain because it was the staff of life for the ancient world. Think of barley as a foundational prebiotic, a grain that builds the infrastructure of your gut microbiome, the way it built the agricultural foundation of civilization itself. Number 8, garlic, the pungent, fiery bulb that has been both food and medicine for over 5,000 years. In the Talmud, there is a specific instruction to eat garlic on the eve of the Sabbath. The reasons given include its ability to warm the body and increase vitality. But the ancient sages were tapping into something far more profound. Garlic is one of the most potent prebiotic foods on the planet. It contains fructooligosaccharides, or FOS, and inulin-type fructans. These fibers selectively feed bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, while simultaneously inhibiting the growth of harmful bacteria like E. coli and salmonella, but garlic's power doesn't stop there. It also contains allicin, a sulfur compound that is released when the clove is crushed or chopped. Allicin has direct antimicrobial, antiviral, and antifungal properties. So garlic performs a dual function in your gut. It feeds the good bacteria and it helps suppress the bad. Modern clinical research has shown that daily garlic use demonstrates some of the strongest microbiome effects of any food studied. Here's the traditional use. Crush or chop the garlic and let it sit exposed to the air for 10 minutes before cooking or consuming it. This allows the enzyme alliinase to convert alliin into allicin. If you cook it immediately, you destroy the enzyme and lose much of the medicinal benefit. Raw garlic is the most potent, but it can be harsh on the stomach. A traditional preparation is to mince a clove and swallow it with a spoonful of raw honey, which itself is a prebiotic. Think of garlic as a targeted antimicrobial and prebiotic in one, a bulb that cleans house and then feeds the family. The ancient Israelites ate it in Egypt, and they craved it in the desert. It wasn't just flavor they were missing, it was genuine medicine. Number 7, onions. The layered, tear-inducing root of the allium family. If garlic is the fiery warrior of the prebiotic world, the onion is its more patient, steady cousin. Raw onions contain approximately 4 to 7 grams of prebiotic fiber per 100 grams, primarily in the form of inulin and FOS. But onions also contain quercetin, a flavonoid that your gut bacteria convert into metabolites that have profound anti-inflammatory and immune-modulating effects. The onion is mentioned in the same breath as garlic and leeks in the Israelites' lament in the Book of Numbers. These 3 alliums were the cornerstone of their diet in Egypt, and they formed a complete prebiotic protocol. Modern science has confirmed that the fructans in onions are fermented almost exclusively by beneficial bacteria in the colon, leading to a significant increase in bifidobacterium populations. Here's the traditional use. Raw onion offers the highest prebiotic load, as cooking can degrade some of the fructan structure. Thinly sliced red onion added to a salad or as a garnish on a stew provides a crisp, sharp dose of prebiotic fiber. If raw onion is too pungent for you, lightly sautéing them preserves more of the prebiotic content than long, slow cooking. Fermented onions, a traditional preparation in many cultures, are an exceptional source of both prebiotics and probiotics. Think of the onion as a foundational layer in your gut health protocol. It's not glamorous, it makes you cry when you cut it, but it builds the substrate upon which your entire microbial community thrives. We've hidden it away in processed foods as onion powder, stripped of its fiber and its life. The genuine article, sliced fresh, is a daily tonic your ancestors relied on without even knowing the science behind it. Number 6, dandelion greens. The bitter weed that your grandfather pulled from his lawn and your great-grandmother harvested for medicine. This plant is not a weed. It is a liver tonic, a digestive bitter, and a prebiotic powerhouse that modern lawns have declared war on. To our collective detriment, fresh dandelion greens contain up to 13 grams of inulin per 100 grams of fresh weight. That puts them in the same league as chicory root, which makes sense because dandelion and chicory are botanical cousins. The bitterness you taste when you chew a fresh dandelion leaf is a signal to your digestive system to release bile, to produce enzymes, to prepare for nourishment. That bitterness also indicates the presence of sesquiterpene lactones, compounds that have documented anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer properties. Modern clinical research has shown that dandelion extracts stimulate the growth of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus while simultaneously reducing populations of pathogenic bacteria. The entire plant is useful: the root, the leaves, even the bright yellow flowers. Here's the traditional use. Young dandelion leaves, harvested before the plant flowers, are less bitter and can be eaten raw in salads. Older leaves benefit from a quick blanch in boiling water, which softens the bitterness while preserving much of the inulin. The roots can be dug, scrubbed, dried, and roasted to make a coffee substitute, very similar to chicory. Think of the dandelion as a complete pharmacy growing at your feet, a plant that was revered for centuries before the modern lawn care industry convinced us it was an enemy. The bitterness you're avoiding is precisely the medicine your gut has been starving for. We spray it with herbicides and then wonder why our digestion is a wreck. Number 5. Jerusalem artichokes, the knobby brown tuber that is neither from Jerusalem nor an artichoke. This plant, also known as the sunchoke, is a species of sunflower native to North America. It produces underground tubers that are absolutely packed with inulin. A 100-gram serving of Jerusalem artichokes contains between 16 and 20 grams of inulin. That is an extraordinary concentration, making it one of the most probiotically dense foods you can eat. When you consume a Jerusalem artichoke, you are delivering a massive payload of fermentable fiber directly to your colon. The bifidobacterium and lactobacillus populations explode, producing a surge of butyrate and other short-chain fatty acids. But here's the caution. This surge can be so powerful that it causes significant gas and bloating in people who are not accustomed to high prebiotic intake. The Jerusalem artichoke has earned the nickname fartichoke for a reason. This is not a flaw in the food. It is a sign of a dysbiotic gut that is being rapidly recolonized. Modern clinical studies have shown that gradual introduction of Jerusalem artichokes leads to a significant improvement in bowel regularity, a reduction in constipation, and a long-term shift toward a healthier microbial composition. Here's the traditional use. Start very small. A thin slice or two, not a whole tuber. You can eat them raw, shaved thinly into salads where they add a crisp, nutty, slightly sweet crunch. You can roast them like potatoes, but the inulin caramelizes into a sweet, almost nutty flavor. The key is patience and gradual introduction. Think of the Jerusalem artichoke as a potent prebiotic supplement delivered in whole food form. It's not a daily staple. It's a targeted intervention, a reset button for a sluggish, constipated, starved microbiome. We've ignored this tuber because it's ugly and it causes gas. But that gas is the sound of your gut bacteria waking up and going to work. Number 4, green bananas and plantains, the starchy, astringent fruit that most people discard as unripe. In tropical regions around the world, green bananas and plantains have been a dietary staple for millennia. They are not eaten for their sweetness, they are eaten for their starch. A 100-gram serving of green banana contains approximately 4.7 grams of resistant starch. That starch is completely indigestible to your enzymes. It sails through your stomach and small intestine untouched and arrives in your colon, where your gut bacteria ferment it into short-chain fatty acids. Butyrate is the primary product. As I've said before, butyrate is the preferred fuel source for your colonocytes. It literally feeds the cells that line your large intestine. Without adequate butyrate, those cells atrophy. The tight junctions between them loosen, and you develop leaky gut syndrome, allowing partially digested food particles and bacterial endotoxins to enter your bloodstream and trigger systemic inflammation. Modern clinical trials have demonstrated that green banana flour and green banana consumption significantly reduce intestinal permeability, improve insulin sensitivity, and increase fecal butyrate concentrations. Here's the traditional use. Green bananas can be boiled, mashed, and seasoned with salt and olive oil, a dish common in many Caribbean and African cuisines. They can be sliced thin and dehydrated into chips. Green banana flour can be added to smoothies or used in gluten-free baking. The taste is bland and starchy, not sweet. That blandness is a feature, not a bug. It means the starch is still intact and ready to feed your bacteria. Think of the green banana as a direct fuel injection for your colon. The ripe, sweet banana has its own value. But the green banana is a completely different food. A prebiotic medicine that your gut recognizes and rewards with a surge of healing butyrate. Number 3, black beans, the dark, dense legume that anchors so many traditional diets. Among all the legumes, black beans stand out for their exceptionally high content of resistant starch and soluble prebiotic fiber. A 100-gram serving of cooked black beans contains 4 to 5 grams of resistant starch, along with raffinose family oligosaccharides, which are complex sugars that your gut bacteria ferment. The dark color of the bean's skin is not just aesthetic. It indicates the presence of anthocyanins, powerful flavonoid compounds that your gut bacteria convert into anti-inflammatory metabolites. Black beans provide a double prebiotic effect. The fiber feeds the bacteria, and the polyphenols in the dark skin selectively stimulate the growth of beneficial species while inhibiting pathogens. Modern clinical research has shown that regular black bean consumption significantly increases fecal short-chain fatty acid concentrations, improves bowel regularity, and reduces markers of colon inflammation. Here's the traditional use. Dried black beans should be soaked overnight in warm water with a splash of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice. This begins to neutralize the phytic acid and enzyme inhibitors that can make beans difficult to digest. The soaking water should be discarded, and the beans cooked in fresh water with a strip of kombu seaweed, which further improves digestibility and adds its own prebiotic polysaccharides. The result is a creamy, earthy bean that feeds your gut bacteria for hours. Think of black beans as a foundational prebiotic staple, a food that should be eaten weekly, not occasionally. The dark skin that stains your cooking pot is a visible sign of the polyphenols that will travel to your colon and nourish your microbial community. We've replaced slow-cooked beans with fast food, and our guts have lost a steady source of the resistant starch they need to thrive. Number 2, raw honey, the golden, viscous nectar that Scripture describes as a foundational promise. The phrase, "a land flowing with milk and honey," appears in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Jeremiah. It was not a poetic accident. It was a nutritional promise. Raw, unprocessed honey is not just sugar. It contains oligosaccharides, the same class of prebiotic fibers found in onions and garlic, which feed Bifidobacterium and lactobacillus. But honey also contains enzymes, trace minerals, and phenolic compounds that processed honey lacks entirely. Modern clinical studies have confirmed that raw honey consumption increases Bifidobacterium populations and reduces the presence of pathogenic bacteria like Clostridium difficile. The darker the honey, the higher the prebiotic and phenolic content. Buckwheat honey, manuka honey, and wildflower honeys from diverse floral sources are particularly potent. But here's the critical distinction. This only applies to raw, unheated honey. The pasteurized, filtered honey in the plastic bear at the grocery store has been stripped of its enzymes and many of its oligosaccharides. It is essentially just sugar syrup with a honey flavor. Here's the traditional use. A teaspoon of raw, local honey dissolved in warm, not hot, water with a squeeze of lemon. The water must be warm enough to dissolve the honey, but not so hot that it destroys the enzymes. This is an ancient tonic for digestion and immunity. You can also drizzle raw honey over your oats, your yogurt, or your fruit. But never cook with it if you want to preserve its prebiotic properties. Think of raw honey as liquid gold, a sacred food that was revered by every ancient culture for reasons that modern science is only now beginning to fully validate. The land flowing with milk and honey was a land where gut health was built into the very landscape. And finally, number 1. The food sitting at the very top of this countdown. The most probiotically potent and therapeutically powerful substance in the entire list. Unsweetened cocoa powder. The dark, bitter, sacred bean of the ancient Americas that modern science has only recently begun to understand. When I say cocoa, I am not talking about a sugary chocolate bar or a hot cocoa mix loaded with milk powder and corn syrup. I am talking about pure, unsweetened, non-alkalized cocoa powder, the ground remains of the fermented and roasted cacao bean. Cocoa is extraordinarily rich in flavonols, specifically epicatechin and catechin, and a host of other polyphenols. These compounds are not digestible by your human enzymes. They pass through your stomach and small intestine and arrive in your colon, where your beneficial bacteria, particularly Bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, feast on them. The bacteria convert these polyphenols into smaller, bioactive metabolites that enter your bloodstream and exert profound anti-inflammatory, cardioprotective, and neuroprotective effects. Modern clinical trials have demonstrated that regular consumption of high flavanol cocoa significantly increases bifidobacterium and lactobacillus populations, while simultaneously reducing Clostridium counts. It lowers blood pressure, improves insulin sensitivity, and reduces markers of systemic inflammation. The mechanism is prebiotic. The cocoa is feeding the bacteria that then produce the compounds that heal your body. Here's the traditional use. 1 to 2 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder stirred into warm water or warm milk, sweetened lightly with raw honey. This is a traditional beverage that predates modern hot chocolate by thousands of years. The Maya and Aztec cultures revered cacao as a gift from the gods. They consumed it as a bitter, frothy beverage, often spiced with chili and vanilla. They didn't understand the microbiome. They didn't know about bifidobacterium or flavonols. But they observed what happened when they consumed this dark, bitter powder. Their digestion improved, their energy increased, their minds felt clearer. Modern science has finally caught up to what they knew empirically. Cocoa is a prebiotic medicine. Think of unsweetened cocoa powder as the ultimate prebiotic food, a dark, bitter, sacred substance that transforms your gut microbiome into a healing factory. It's not a treat, it's not a dessert. It's a daily tonic. A genuine medicine that happens to taste like the richest chocolate you've ever experienced once your palate adjusts to the absence of sugar. We've drowned cocoa in milk and sugar and turned it into candy, forgetting that the genuine article, the bitter, dark powder, was always the medicine. It was always the prebiotic, it was always the gift.